And I am delighted this afternoon to welcome two gentlemen to my studio. It's not very often I get the chance to have two such nice gentlemen with me. One of them, no stranger to downtown radio, certainly on this programme, because he's written that many books. I'm nearly fed up talking to him about them. He is Alf McCreary, and Alf has just published a book which is looks at the history of the trustees' savings banks in Northern Ireland. And also, my very special guest of today is the Archbishop of Armagh and Primate of all Ireland, the Most Reverend Dr. Robin Eames. Good afternoon, Your Grace. Good afternoon, Alf.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for coming to join me today, because it's almost like a lovely reunion in many ways. The last time we saw each other was actually at the launch of your book, Alf, which, of course, Dr. Eames very kindly said, well, he said all sorts of nice things about it that night. Did he mean them?
He did. I hope he did anyway.
I think he did.
In the meantime, I've had the task of reviewing his book.
I know.
For a well-known magazine, so I hope he likes my review.
He hasn't read it yet, he tells me.
Is this beginning to look like a Morecambe and Wise or something like that, isn't it?
I do hope not, Dr. Eames. In fact, it would make one wonder, and it certainly says one thing to me, that in Northern Ireland, it's, we could say it's a bit incestuous, but I don't feel it is. I feel it's the one hopeful thing in Northern Ireland, that everybody sort of knows everybody else and knows of each other. Would you agree?
I think this is very true. I think it's got its plus and its minuses, obviously. The further you go from Northern Ireland, Alf, the more people seem to think. It's like St. Patrick's Day in New York. Yeah. I was in New York. So this has got absolutely nothing to do with the book. But
we'll get to the books in a wee while.
I was in St. Patrick's Day, on St. Patrick's Day in New York a few years ago. And really to see the intensity of the feeling for people who had extractions from Ireland years and years ago was unbelievable. No, I think there is the difficulty that we do know each other so well. And yet, if we know each other so well, does this not provide part of the problem that I've tried to look at in my book?
Exactly.
If the solution is there, why on earth haven't we found it?
Well, that's obviously one of the things that you do try to address in Chains to be Broken, just published by the Church of Ireland. My first question to you about the book must be, why did you decide to write the book? What prompted you to write the book?
I have been asked this today
about
over
20
and over
times.
Again. Let me be very, very honest. First of all, it wasn't published by the Church of Ireland. It was published by a firm and by a publisher in London. It's
Weidenfeld and Nicholson.
Weidenfeld and Nicholson.
I beg your pardon.
I wrote it simply because I was asked to. I got an invitation to write this book a few years ago, and at first I must tell you, I said no. I said no, there's enough written about Northern Ireland. If the problems of Northern Ireland could have been solved by books or by what's said on the air or on television, it would have been solved a long time ago. Why should I add to this because I'm too much involved in it and I couldn't be objective? And then it was put to me, look, isn't there a time and isn't there an opportunity for somebody who's a, inverted commas, church leader to give their own perspective to it? And I've tried to do that. In a sense, it's a pilgrimage. And to be equally frank with you, I think I've learned as much about myself in writing the book as I have about what I've tried to examine. And to that extent, I haven't regretted writing the book. It's for others to judge, but, I've in a sense enjoyed it.
Have you? I mean, Alf has already said he has reviewed the book. The review I haven't read, and thank goodness I didn't read it before we had a chance to talk today. Have you had anybody coming forth and saying, look, hold on a wee minute, as they're very good at doing in Northern Ireland, who do you think you are sitting down to write this book, especially in your position as a church leader? Has that filtered to you, if it has happened at all?
Not as such. Good. I can understand if someone did feel that, to be quite frank. Yeah, of course I do. And I mean, when you love a country as I love this place and devote my life to it, of course you understand people will say things like that. I can only say that I've tried to make the book honest. I have tried to be as far seeing in what I say as I can be, but I've also based it very much on my own experience. And really, you don't have to defend your own experience because your own experience is something that's very subjective. But I've tried in places to step aside and say, look, this is what's happened to people. I have had to bury so many victims of violence, and I've had to be in the homes of so many who have suffered, that I will carry those memories to the grave. Now, you can't separate Robin Eames, who does that, from Robin Eames, who writes a book. The person is the same. And I think if I have succeeded in being honest with the reader, then I don't have to defend it.
Yes, exactly. One of the things you told me many years ago, Alf, was if you were ever contemplating writing a book, for goodness sake, write about something that you know and that indeed you have experienced.
That's right, and we share very much the same territory, myself and Robin. I've read the book, and I think it's a very fair book. I think it's a well-written book. I don't mean to sound patronising. It's a well-written book. It's a very useful book, I think, to have from Northern Ireland to give to visitors to take abroad, because there's a perception of Northern Ireland which is not the reality. And Robin Eames, in his position, will be listened to very carefully.
Yes, indeed.
I think it's a very measured book. It's a very controlled book. I know Robin fairly well, and Robin is a very human, warm, very funny person. And I think that perhaps in 10 years' time there may be another book, which will be the Robin Eames memoirs. But this book, I think, is a very careful book. It's very well structured. It's very useful, I think, for local journalists, because I tend to think that I've been over the same territory for 25 years.
Yes.
I recognise there's a sense we get where we feel we've read it all before, because there's nothing much new about the problem. But it's very important to have a book which has got authority, which journalists can read and say, now, yes, that really happened. I'd forgotten that.
Exactly.
And Robin Eames, I think, as he does in his career, walks very carefully through the minefield, and he nudges people towards that very boring concept, which is called reconciliation. You see, I've often said to you in this programme that peace is a very boring subject. It's not, as we say in the business, very sexy, and yet peace and reconciliation are those things which we need. And this is where Dr. Eames has suggested the way.
Certainly. And you say there it's a useful book for journalists. I'm just a wee bit younger than the both of you, and I certainly find it very, very useful to be able to sit down and have the whole lot put together in one place for me. Things, to be quite honest, that I had forgotten about. And that's all there now, documented for people to look over.
I think there's also the point which Robin Eames brings across, I think deliberately or perhaps not. But I think I've been very aware in the recent past that the Protestant point of view has not been heard terribly well, and this is coming across in a very fair way.
Yes,
that's worth discussing later on.
Yes, we'll do that indeed. Well, this afternoon I have with me in studio the Most Reverend Dr. Robin Eames and Alf McCreary. Dr. Eames has recently published a book called Chains to be Broken, which is his view and indeed a discussion of the causes, the consequences, and indeed perhaps some of the lessons behind the tragedies of the last 24 years in our part of the world. Alf McCreary, whom we've spoken to on many occasions, has just published a book which looks at the history of the trustees' savings banks. And the reason for having the two of them here together, just in case you've joined us, is that I met both of them recently at the launch of Alf's book, and I thought it would be appropriate to have the two of them with me in studio today. I've already asked Dr. Eames why he wrote the book, and I suppose now I would like to ask you, as something in fact that Alf pointed out a moment ago, he finds it hard enough to find time to write, don't you, Alf? I mean,
yes.
The actual physical time to sit down and do it.
Yes.
Where on earth do you find the time to write and to have written such a book over the last little while?
I think if you asked the publisher, they'd say that he didn't give enough time to it, because I was months behind the deadline they gave me. But seriously, what I did was I had to discipline myself, and I had to do an awful lot of it early in the morning. Mm-hmm. A lot of the writing was done quite early in the morning, before the day's work hit me and so on. But a lot of it, I must say, came quite easily because it was based on my own experiences.
Yes,
it was really a question of putting it onto paper. Right. I think the only answer is to say that you've got to make time for these things if you're going to do them.
Exactly.
But I miss it. I miss it now. There's a gap at that period in the early morning where I finished doing the drafts of the book, and I miss doing that.
Wait till you get through all the round of publicity which lies ahead, and then you'll be wishing, I wish I'd never started this, I can tell you. Did you have an editor who said, yes, I like that, I don't like that, we'll leave that in, we'll take that out?
Because of the nature of the book, I broke all the rules. I didn't ask anyone to read any of it. And I was only dealing with a very sympathetic lady in the publishers in London, But I honestly have to say that I have to stand over everything. I did it most of it myself.
That's brave.
I didn't have an agent or an editor or anything like that. I wrote it as you read it. It's more or less as it left my pen.
Alf, you said something there a little moment ago about the the things which Dr. Eames says in the book about particularly the Protestant perspective over the last number of years here in Northern Ireland. I must say I find that very honest to me, and indeed things that perhaps nobody else has had the guts to write down before. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, or perhaps the position I've felt in the past year that there's been a kind of a dismissal of the Protestant point of view politically in London, and also culturally. Somehow that we are regarded as Protestants in Northern Ireland as being very difficult people, very unreasonable people, with certain kinds of leaders. And the voice of the ordinary, decent, honest-to-God Protestant who is frightened and feels friendless has not been heard. And Dr. Eames has captured that mood very well. And given his style and authority, this will be read and listened to outside Northern Ireland. And I think it's timely to remind the world that Protestants aren't all unreasonable redneck bigots, that there are very many very decent people who do feel friendless, who have a point of view, who have a right to be Protestant, a right to be Unionist, as part of the greater mix on this island.
Yes, exactly. Over the certainly the time that I have known you and your work here, the one thing that has always stood out to me is the fact, Dr. Eames, that you'll go anywhere, you'll talk to anyone, and you don't mind who finds out where you've been and who you've talked to be quite honest. Has that not given you problems in your life?
Yes, I think it has. Can I sort of put that in its perspective? When I was asked to become Primate in Archbishop of Armagh, I was probably the youngest the Church of Ireland has ever had. I said to myself, well, the fact that I am this age and have been asked to do it, I've got to do it my way. I'm not going to simply model this on someone who has done it when they were nearing retirement and so on. Now, to do that, to put into practice what I believe about the Church, about my belief, about my faith, I had to say, I simply want people to take me as I am. I'm not going to put on a front. I'm going to be Robin Eames as I hope I am. And therefore, yes, I have probably done things and listened to people and talked to people who normally wouldn't have been in that sort of relationship. But I don't apologise for that. I don't think I have anything to defend, because if church leadership can't be relevant to that extent, then I don't see the point of it at all. And if you can't go into a person's home and simply ask them to accept you as you are, and listen to you as you are, you have a point of view, but to feel at ease in your company, then I think there's something wrong, and I think the Church has failed, and to me that's very, very important.
I think one of the things that comes across to me out of Chains to be Broken is the fact that you do sort of utter some thoughts early on that perhaps the Church was sitting back and not really doing anything. They were good and always are at commiserating and saying sorry and how dreadful things are, but on a practical level, I think you personally feel that a lot more could be done.
I think I can say that because I was part of it. It's not as though I'm judging other generations. I was a part of that as a young rector in Belfast. When the Troubles happened, and the starting point of the book is basically 1968, and when it all began, I was a rector up the road here in East Belfast. And I know that we were taken by surprise. And I use the phrase, we were a social ambulance service. And I really do believe that we were. Now I think we've come a long way. I think we are now being much more objective, I hope more Christian in the way in which we look at what's happening to people. That's not to say we don't address some of these divisive issues, which I've tried to look at in the book. Yeah. But you've got to be honest about it, and you've got to say, yes, talk about politics, but not party politics. Talk about social problems, but don't get involved in it. Try and keep an objective view. But so far as church leadership is concerned, I believe people now will not accept you by the title you have if they reject you as a person.
Exactly. And
I think if they get to know the person you are, then I think perhaps that's the justification for the position you hold.
You see, this is very important. You mentioned the kind of person you are. I think if you're writing a book or you've got a post in a church, I think people have to be very important to you. And I think that certainly in my books, my book on Mary Wilson and Enniskillen and my previous books, about peace and war in Northern Ireland. I've written about people. I think there's a danger that we get involved in theology, in academia, in facts and figures, and forget about people. And all the time out there, people are dying, people are being bereaved, people are suffering. That's what's important to me. And when the church can bring that out, that's important. And this is something which Robin has done quite a lot in his speeches and his sermons. And I think, again, people forget. I mean, I'm often regarded as a writer who I hope writes good books, but really is all for peace, and therefore is by implication somehow not quite worldly, a bit naive, which really annoys me, because I am very worldly. I'm not naive. And peace is a very hard thing to sell, because peace, you see, peace isn't dramatic, it isn't quick, it's not a quick fix. It means standing back and trying to listen to that person whom you can't stand across the way, but it's got a point of view. So the church itself has had a very difficult role to present peace for years, and the first person who presented it was crucified, which we forget. So you're in a difficult area. You've no simple fix. You keep saying, be nicer to people.
There's more, if I may say so, because Alf has mentioned his book Mary, which I was very privileged to write a preface for the story of Mary Wilson, a book of human pathos, human endeavour, human courage, a marvellous book, and it's a bestseller, as we know. You see, when you talk about reconciliation, people use that word in Northern Ireland. They talk about ecumenism, reconciliation. They talk about healing the wounds. Very rarely do we stop to say this involves ordinary people. It's not a way out there in the distance. It involves ordinary people, how they think, their attitudes. And one of the things I've tried to say in my book is that the sectarian divisions and the sectarianism that goes so deep in this province of ours, I don't believe we know how deep it goes.
Do you not think, but
I think it's deeper than we realise.
Okay, if you feel it's deeper than we realise. I, for the first time in many years, feel that the voice of the ordinary people is beginning to be heard. They are beginning to say once again, this is enough. We don't want any more of this. What more can they do?
Well, this is the old conundrum of people power.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes, and you describe that very well in the book.
When you consider what's happened in Eastern Europe, could you have believed that 10 years ago, Alf and I'd be sitting here talking to you, and that the Berlin Wall would have gone, and that the Soviet Union would have been...
This is true.
You see, people say you don't believe in miracles. If that happens, surely to goodness there's a breakthrough can come in a small piece of earth called Northern Ireland. And those of us who are here, whether as writers or church leaders, broadcasters, it doesn't matter. I want to try and preach the gospel that everybody has a role to play, and that you're not being asked to change what you are, but you're asked to put what you are into the perspective of how others perceive it, because perception can become the reality in Northern Ireland.
And there's a very important point that, I mean, I have been writing about peace for 25 years. You have been preaching peace and working peace in your career. And you get to the point where you think, well, I've said it all before. I have nothing new to say.
Right.
But you must remember that what you're saying is not just you. It's an eternal kind of truth. And that to somebody out there, it may be fresh and new. Now, I'm aware, as you are, as we are, of this drive for peace, but it doesn't come by having a drive after every atrocity and then going back and watching the television. It's got to become permanent. You've got to pressurize your politicians to make peace. You've got to think peace. And the most difficult thing is that you have to begin to think peaceful thoughts to the other side.
Yeah.
And that's the hard bit. You can't say
that's
it's
getting
up to
down
Robin
this.
Williams, up to Alf McCreary, up to the politicians. You've got to say now, your man on the other side, well, maybe he's not as bad as I thought. And that's the hard bit. So we've all got to play a bit for peace. Otherwise, we'll be here for the next 25 years.
And we'll still be
awful
talking. Yes, exactly.
situation.
Now, we've mentioned many of the things that are in the book. We obviously want people to read it and to take the whole thing into context. But just before I finish off with you, Dr. Eames, this very afternoon, some 5,000 young people have been marching through Belfast and more or less have been saying, you know, it's time we did something, because obviously nobody else is doing anything. That I think they feel a little let down by what hasn't been done or what hasn't occurred. What would you say to the youth? Because we always say, no matter where we live, that our future must be with the youth and the young people.
One of the chapters in my book is based really on the experiences I've had with young people. the young people of the Troubles who have grown up not knowing normality and in many ways are the real victims of our situation. But I try to make the point that we always talk about young people as though they were next generation, tomorrow's people. I try to say that they're part of today. They're growing up in this situation. What do I say to young people? What I've constantly said to them, and I love to spend as much time as I can with young people, I simply say, look, you have the chance to undo the damage that other generations have done. You have a chance as you grow up. But the great risk is that what will happen to you is what's happened to us. That we will fall into a mould, we'll fall into a way of thinking, we'll fall into the traps that other generations have had. And I say to them, look, take your vision of the future, take your idealism, don't lose it. Take it in and try and make it work. The tragedy of it is, as you know, is that, and I call them our most precious commodity, our most precious export, is so many of them are leaving because they don't see a future here. That, to me, is one of the real tragedies. But I have seen the faces of the young people in the Troubles. I've seen them walking beside a coffin. I've seen them in a home that has suddenly been stricken with a murder. I've seen them grow up and come and talk to me years later and talk about their father and mother. I can't leave. The faces of the young people haunt me. And in a sense, that chapter in the book is one that I found probably the most moving myself to write.
There's one child you mention in the book that stirred me, that made me chill when I was reading it. Way back in 68, would it have been?
It was 68 or 69, I honestly can't remember. This was the case of the working in East Belfast, and in those days we all tried to help what we could, and there was this mob one night setting on a house, and I was told there was a child in it, but no one knew where the child was. I went round to the back and I found that the child was hiding in a coal shed at the back, in behind the pile of coal or slack, whatever it was. And without knowing what I did, I just grabbed that little child in my arms and I ran. I don't know where I ran. I ran to get away because they would have burned that house and they would have burned the child. And it's in the book. I just wish I knew what happened to that child now. Where is she? What is she doing? How does she feel about it? Because that child to me will always be the epitome for me of what we've come through. The horrid part.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Thank goodness, I hope the book also tells the story of hope.
Hope, that's
and
it.
the humour and the decency and everything else that we know is in this community. I hope it does.
I was having a good laugh about you before I actually officially met you, with two ladies very close to your heart who will kill me this afternoon for referring to them as the Keenan sisters.
Yes, of course.
They don't like to be called that. But when they published their book, and you very carefully and kindly took them to Beirut, and they were going to do a bit of a runner on you, I believe, Dr. Eames. They were thinking about it, weren't they?
Two of the most remarkable ladies I've ever met in my life. It was a privilege to meet them, to know them, to be with them, and to help them in a small way. And the release of Brian Keenan was one of the things that it'll always be with me. But I have a great admiration for those two ladies, and if they're listening, I send them my love.
Listen.
I send them my love.
I hope they are.
You mentioned hope. I think it's terribly important that we don't forget hope. I know that sounds perhaps a bit pious, but I mean, if you've travelled as you have, and I have, been lucky to travel around the world, you see in context that Northern Ireland has got so much going for it. It's got so much which is good. We tend to, because we live here, to be battered by the latest atrocity and by the sadness and think there'll never be peace. But there will be peace on this island, and it will come perhaps in our lifetime. And we have to have that hope in our hearts and keep that up front. Because the worst thing I find from people in Northern Ireland of all ages is if when they say, actually there's no hope. There is hope.
Yes,
there is hope. But hope again starts with you. And I think we are seeing now in a very, very amateurish way, a very real way, a struggle for peace from ordinary people.
Yes.
Because the people have had enough of war, enough of the politicians who aren't making peace, and they will make peace their way. I don't know how, but it's going to come.
Well, do you know what else is going to come, Alf? You're going to come back some other day. Would you have a wee free day soon, Alf?
Well, I am now speechless. I'm
very touched by this. I really am. I'm very touched.
But
I
mean, I'm sure we can deal with my latest book very adequately in the time left. Because Robin Eames has read it. He gave it a very nice review at the launch.
He did.
It is a book which actually is the history of the TSB over 175 years. began in very humble circumstances.
It began in very humble, pompous circumstances, I thought. You know, these people with a bit of money saying, we must look after these poor drunkards and these poor people. I thought some of that stuff was hilarious.
Well, I think that was the language of the times, and some of those people did actually devote a lot of time to helping others. And in a way, it grew then into the Belfast Savings Bank. And it's a bank which many people remember, which is their...
I'm sure everybody had an account there.
And then became the TSB. And I was asked to write the book like Robin in a different sense. A man called Reg McCadden, who was a former chairman, had written a history from 1946 on. And I looked at his history, and then we decided to do the complete history. And then I was left with an absolute room full of documents of all kinds of old archives and minute books. And I remember the Brian Johnson from the TSB, chief executive, sitting on the floor of the strong room smoking a cigar, as is his wont.
But not as many as nowadays.
Not as many as he used to. And I thought to myself, my goodness, how will I ever get through this and write a readable book? I hope I've done that because I really tried to write about people, about ordinary people, extraordinary people.
Could you remind us about the wee story? Was it in Enniskillen they had the problem with the branch where they shared a building?
There were boys in Enniskillen who were right lads in their day, and in the language of the times, they were exhorted not to lean out of the windows of the Reform Club, Fermanagh Club on Sundays because they were annoying churchgoers who were passing by. There were lots of quite humorous stories. I remember up in West Belfast, one of the branches was bombed and burned. And Brian Johnson came up the next morning, I remember that day, and looked at the damage and his heart sank. And suddenly someone appeared and said, "Hi, mister, can I take out some money?" And they thought the bank was still operating, very much Northern Ireland.
There was another story in there about, was it Stanley Anderson, who when asked by a workman one day at the house, how many branches do you have?
And he said 55. He said, "No, you're wrong, 54, or Downs and Fire." And that's, again, that is also our ability to laugh in the midst of mayhem.
Exactly.
But I think that the important point about the book is that for a long time, the Belfast Savings Bank actually was the umbrella for a rainy day. Yeah. Then with the Beveridge Report and the welfare state, then people didn't have to save against the rainy day so much. And the whole banking situation changed. So what began as a book, which was a birthday celebration, is now, I hope, a definitive history of...
Yes, because...
And it's also, can I interrupt a minute? It's also a book about people.
He brings
about forward the character of people doing ordinary things in ordinary ways. I think it's a delightful book. I can give him a plug now.
Actually, the way we've been entwining our books, the only thing for me to do is to ghost Robin Eames' memoirs.
I think he's looking for a job. I do.
No, I think you do it yourself very well. And I hope that you will, when you retire in 25 years' time, that you will put pen to paper and you will write your own very witty memoirs.
Well, Alf, if I do, you'll read the proofs.
Because there's a book there as well.
Gentlemen, I can't thank the both of you enough for coming today. Alf, I would love to talk with you at a later date, because there's so many funny stories about the real people who were the trustees' savings banks for all those years, because of course it was all sold over last year and bought by the Allied Irish.
That's right.
So it's all a bit different. It's a total history now of the banks as they were. Thanks for joining me. See you soon, I hope.